Good morning, everybody. Today we are talking about synthesizing conclusions. So this is our last lesson here on techniques for writing. So before we talk about how to synthesize a conclusion, let's first figure out what a conclusion even is. So a conclusion is going to wrap up your essay. It's going to be that last paragraph at the bottom of your essay. It's also going to demonstrate to the reader that you accomplished what you set out to do. And when I say that, I mean it shows how you proved your thesis. So remember, at the beginning of your essay, towards the bottom of that first paragraph, you wrote a thesis statement. You wrote your main idea of your entire essay, what your goal was for that essay, what you wanted your reader to know by the end of the essay. This conclusion is going to show your reader that you accomplished that. And it's going to provide them with a sense of closure. They're not going to think there's more to come. They're going to know, based off of the way you write, that this is the last paragraph without saying the end, because we don't do that in conclusions. So a conclusion is the opposite of an introduction. We kind of talked about that, how the thesis is at the beginning in your first paragraph, the conclusion is at the end. So the conclusion is the opposite of the introduction. So that means we're going to write it kind of in an opposite way as an introduction. So if you remember, an introduction begins general and ends specific, kind of like that inverted pyramid type hook we were talking about. It starts off pretty broad and gets more and more specific until it hits your thesis statement. Well, the conclusion is the opposite. It starts specific. It starts with you rephrasing that thesis statement and then moves to more general language as you explain how what you said proves your thesis statement. So what should you include in your conclusion? Your topic sentence should rephrase what you said in your thesis statement. So that first sentence in your conclusion should rephrase in a roundabout way what you said in your thesis statement in that first paragraph. Now, you don't just restate what you said, because that's poor writing. Because if you're taking a sentence that they already read, so if you're taking that exact sentence that you wrote as your thesis statement and just copying and pasting it to your last paragraph, that's poor writing. We want to rephrase. Say the same thing, get the same idea across, but do it in different words. It should not bring up new ideas. So your conclusion is wrapping up all the ideas you talked about. If you have a new idea, then you're going to need one more paragraph. So if you want to talk about that new idea, that's great. Do it in one more paragraph before your conclusion. Don't do that during your conclusion. Your supporting sentences should revisit and synthesize what was said about your limited topics. So remember, your limited topics are those supporting details for your thesis. They're what you're writing your other paragraphs about. So those are your body paragraphs. So you're going to revisit those ideas in your body paragraph, and then you're going to synthesize your limited topics. And we'll talk about what synthesize means here in a little bit. But your closing sentence, that very last sentence, should help your reader feel a sense of closure. They should know that the essay has been completed. You don't just want to kind of end on a half thought, or you definitely don't want to say the end, because that's not a good way to end a paragraph or essay. So your closing sentence is your last word on the subject. We call that your clincher. So remember, we had your hook as your first sentence or your first sentences in your essay. Your clincher is your ending, your last sentence or two in your essay. It should demonstrate the importance of your thesis, and it's going to propel your reader to a new view of the subject. So basically, it's going to kind of finish it off with your reader thinking that they may have learned something, or their opinion may still be the same, but they understand at least your side of the story in your opinion. So in your conclusion, we synthesize. We do not summarize. So I know in the past, elementary teachers taught you to summarize in your conclusions, and that's really just poor writing, because a lot of times what students will do is when they summarize, they're just copying and pasting sentences they already said, and they're being vague, and they're not really explaining how anything proved their thesis. They're just repeating themselves in something they already said, which is poor writing. Basically, what I'm saying here is if you are reading a book during silent reading time and you get to chapter 17, and chapter 17 is just a cut and paste of what chapter 1, 2, and 3 were, you're going to be kind of annoyed that you read it again. Same thing goes with reading essays. You don't want your reader to be annoyed that you're just repeating yourself. They're going to say something like, hey, I already read this in the paragraph above it. So you want to synthesize, and we're going to talk about what that means. So it means explain how your limited topics support your thesis rather than just simply repeating your limited topics. So remember, those limited topics, if you remember from your outline lesson, those limited topics are your body paragraphs. You're going to mention them in your first introduction paragraph, and then you're going more into depth in your body paragraphs, adding examples and explanations. So what I'm saying here is in your conclusion, instead of just repeating what those limited topics were, you're going to explain how that limited topic proved your thesis. So let's look at an example. So as you can see, by exercising regularly, you will burn calories and maintain a healthy weight. So there, you're talking about just exercising will help you burn calories and maintain a weight, rather than just saying, as you can see, exercising is healthy. So what we're saying here is, in our body paragraphs, one of our paragraphs was probably about how exercising is healthy. But we're not just going to say, as you can see, exercising is healthy. And that's probably what our thesis was trying to get us to understand. But now we're saying burning calories and maintaining weight is a result of exercise, and that's why it's healthy. So we're kind of proving to our reader how all of those limited topics supported that thesis of exercise being healthy. So let's take a look at how this is going to work in your outline. So if you remember, we learned about outlines, how they help us organize at the very beginning. We're going to go back and kind of revisit that. So let's take a look at this outline. And let me zoom in here for you. So using your outline to synthesize. Okay, so here is, we're pretending this is the conclusion paragraph portion of the outline. So as you can see, when students put forth more effort in their schooling, they receive better grades. So if you remember from a few slides back, that topic sentence there, that letter A that we just read, that is rephrasing your thesis statement. So our thesis statement must have been saying something about doing your schoolwork to receive better grades. Now we're going to talk about our limited topics. They don't forget to do their homework since they take it home every night. They now have the help from older siblings and parents that they wouldn't have in school. They get into the habit of studying for all their tests. So those were what our 3 body paragraphs were discussing to prove how schooling is going to be better if you take it home. You're going to get better grades. And then we do our clincher. With all of that being said, students who take their work home daily receive better grades in school. So now let's take a look on how we don't just write this word for word. We're going to try to synthesize it here. Because remember, we don't want to just summarize. We want to say how this is proving that students are receiving better grades. So in orange here, you can see how we took that outline. So here's the outline again. And all we did was just put it in paragraph form and threw a little bit of extra beef in there in orange by synthesizing, by saying how it proves our thesis statement. So as you can see, when students put forth more effort in their schooling, they receive better grades. They don't forget to do their homework since they take it home every night. So that was letter A here and number 1. But we didn't just go right on to number 2 like most students would. We're going to synthesize that. By completing homework, students get the practice needed to do well in school. Therefore, their grades will increase. Now we're going to go on to that number 2 here. They now have help from older siblings and parents that they wouldn't have in school. So bringing the work home also provides help from an older sibling or parent. And again, we're going to synthesize. We're going to explain how does that prove that our thesis is correct. Receiving help from others may help students improve their grades. If you look at number 3, they get into the habit of studying for all their tests. They get into the habit of studying for all their tests. And we don't just jump right into our clincher. Again, we're going to synthesize. We're going to talk about how that proves our thesis. So by studying, the students pass their tests and receive good grades. And now we're just going to add our clincher to the bottom there. With all that being said, students who take their work home daily receive better grades in school. So I do want to point out, when we synthesize, if you look at the word synthesize here, I'm going to highlight it. So look at this word synthesize here. When we synthesize, we are trying to prove our thesis. And a way to remember that, inside of the word synthesize is almost the word thesis. So remember, when you synthesize, you aren't just summarizing. When you synthesize, you're proving your thesis. Have a great day, and I'll see you all when it's time to write our essay.